Hello, welcome to Vehicle Gold Leafing Techniques. My name is Gary Jenson, and I've been pinstriping, lettering, and gold leafing for over 20 years. I want to teach you some top pro tricks, so hey, let's get started. I'd like to start by introducing you to the products most commonly used in gold leafing. We'll start by talking about the gold size. Size is the terminology used to describe the glue that bonds the gold leaf to the surface. It's available in two different types, quick dry and slow dry. The fastest drying quick size would be the synthetic size. The drying time on this particular size ranges from 30 minutes to about an hour and a half. Going over here, we have the 3-hour sizes. These sizes are most suitable for projects that take between 3 to 5 hours to complete. The 3-hour size is resin-based and it's basically a varnish. Now going over here, we have the slow size. Slow size is a varnish fattened up by linseed oil to extend the window of workability, so it's also known as fat size. These are for jobs that require extensive amount of time to complete, so the window of workability starts about 12 hours and can stay workable all the way up to 4 weeks or even longer. You can customize your gild time by adding quick size as an accelerator to your slow size, up to 50% by volume. Gild time is the window of time that's available to successfully apply the leaf to the size. The most commonly used brands of gold leaf sizes are Luco, One Shot, and Lefranc. Gold size in its original state is clear, so in order to see the gold size on the project, it must be tinted lightly. For that, I use a very small amount of one-shot lettering enamel in a contrasting color to the surface being worked, or I use this universal tinting paste by Mixol. Okay, now let's move on to the gold leaf itself. Gold leaf comes packaged in 3 different varieties. Let's start off with the loose leaf. As the name implies, it's packaged loosely between rubbed paper. It's also very delicate and hard to handle. Next, we'll go to the patent leaf. Patent leaf is lightly attached to this backing paper to make it a lot easier to handle. Okay, last but not least, we have the rolled leaf. Rolled leaf is used for thinner, long line projects. It's available in rolls from 1/4 inch to 3 inches in width and various types of leaf. Now we have the composition leaf. As you can see here, we have imitation gold, aluminum, copper, and variegated. As you can see, the variegated leaf is chemically treated to achieve a brilliant, bright colored effect. Okay, now this funky variegated leaf is available through Coast Airbrush. Variegated leaf is chemically treated to achieve a bright, multi-colored effect. Next, we have the spinning tools, used for engine turning. This is probably the most recognized gold leaf effect. They can either be hand-held or inserted into a variable speed drill. These are made of soft material covered in velvet with a slight dome shape. These particular tools are available through Quill, Hare, and Farrell. Okay, you want to be sure that you protect your leaf after you apply it, and the best way to do that is by using urethane clear coats. Here we have House of Color brand and Imron. They're both catalyzed urethanes and they're very durable for outdoor use. Now we have the House of Color candy concentrates. These are great for tinting the leaf in a wide variety of colors. Candy concentrates are mixed with the SG100 up to about 20 to 30% on average. If you need to, you can reduce it with RU311, but for durability, try to keep the clear as thick as possible. Here we see the larger squirrel hair brushes. These brushes are used to apply the gold size and the clear coating. This type brush is available through Luco, French Master, the Mac Brush Company, and Quill, Hare, and Farrell, among other sources. For the pinstripe outline, I suggest using the Jenson Swirly Q or the Mac 10 series Sword Striper. These brushes are available through Mac Brush Company. If the entire project is going to be clear coated, I would suggest using the House of Colored striping urethane to outline your leaf. However, if you only need to clear the leaf itself, I would suggest using the one-shot oil-based enamel. It works just fine. The cotton balls will be used to remove any excess leaf and also press the leaf down for better adhesion. Now you want to make sure that the surface you work on is very clean of any contaminants. You want to start off by using a glass cleaner to get off any water-based contaminants. Then switch over to the wax and grease remover to get off any waxes or silicones. And don't forget the tack rag. Don't want any dust there either. Sorrel paper is a handy way to transfer patterns onto the surface. Fine line tape is used to mask off long, straight lines. Okay, this is the most important thing you're going to learn in this video. I'm going to show you the extremes of applying the leaf too soon, just right, and a little too late. Okay, right here, this is the point we reached about 10 minutes after I applied the size. You'll notice I'm getting quite a bit of stick there. I got some product onto my knuckle, and also when you drag your knuckle across it, you're going to see one heck of a smear. That's not good. Let's go ahead and wait 10 more minutes and see what happens. Okay, we waited 10 more minutes. Let's go ahead and give it a test. There's a knuckle test. You can see it's a little tacky, but not quite tacky enough. Let's give it the smear test. We definitely got a good smear there. That's not good. Let's go ahead and wait 10 more minutes and go from there. Okay, just as an example, I'm going to go ahead and apply the leaf while the size is too wet, just to show you what happens when you do that. Okay, you'll notice here that the leaf is very dull, and that's not what you want. Just for fun, I'm going to go ahead and spin this just to show you what happens when you put the gold leaf on the sides while it's still too wet. Not very eye-appealing. This is a great example. What you see right here is called gold blooming. That's where the gold size is a little bit too wet, and it actually drowns the leaf, making it very dull. And as you spin it, the velvet actually dug in past the gold into the gold size, producing a very dull spin. Let's go ahead and wait a few minutes and try it again. Okay, here's a hot tip. What I'm doing here is applying this composition leaf, which is quite a bit thicker than the 23 karat leaf. As you can see what happened here, putting on the 23 karat leaf over that gooier size made it very dull. But composition leaf is quite a bit thicker, so it needs a little bit more gooiness to attach itself to the size. Okay, we're going to give this composition leaf a little bit of a spin here just to see how it works out. After spinning this leaf, I noticed it might be a little bit too wet still. So we're going to go ahead and give it a few more minutes and go from there. It's been another 10 minutes now. We're going to go ahead and give it another knuckle test. You'll notice here we're getting a little bit of a dull finish. We're going to go ahead and try to apply some 23 karat. Let's just see what happens. Okay, we're going to go ahead and tickle it and give it a quick spin. Okay, now we're getting better. You'll notice here we got a much more brilliant spin than we did when the size was too soft. Let's go ahead and give it 10 more minutes and see what happens then. Okay, now it's been about 35 minutes after I've applied the size. Let's give it a quick test. Okay, now we're getting a more pronounced squeak. At this point, it's still a little bit gooey for 23 karat, but we're going to go ahead and apply some more of this composition leaf because it's just about right for a perfect application. Right now, it almost appears like the size is a little bit too dry for this composition leaf. Let's just go ahead and just make sure. Let's go ahead and give it a tickle. If I see any leaf come off the size, I know it's been past its time limit. Right now, we're looking okay. Let's give it a spin. Okay, look how much more brilliant this spin is than when the size was too soft. With the conditions we're working under today, at 35 minutes, this is a great time to add the composition leaf. This will vary according to your heat and humidity in your area. Okay, now it's been 40 minutes. Let's give it the knuckle test. Okay, now we're getting a really good squeak. There's no product onto the knuckle. Let's go ahead and apply some 23 karat and see how it works this time. I'm going to go ahead and tickle that, get rid of some of that excess leaf, and give it a spin. That's much more brilliant, but as you can see right through here, now we're reaching the very critical point. It's almost too late to apply the leaf. Okay, we're getting very close now to the point of no return. We're going to go ahead and apply one more sheet of leaf here, the 23 karat. Pat it down good. We're going to tickle that, give it a burnish, and a quick spin just to see if we get some brilliance here. We can go just a little bit longer. The reason I did this test immediately after the first is because the gold here was a little bit jagged out of the roll. So what I wanted to do is go ahead and do a complete section here so I can get a great indication of whether the size was too wet or too dry. Right now it's a little bit too wet. Let's give it a few more minutes and go from there. Okay, it's been about 47 minutes. This is drying fairly quickly now since it's a quick drying size. I'm going to go ahead and do my testing a little bit more frequently. I'm going to apply the 23 karat, give it a quick burnish. Notice how it has a little bit more brilliance now that the size is a little bit drier. Let's give it a spin. Notice how much more brilliant this spin is than the previous. It's because the size is just a little bit drier, so it makes a much more brilliant spin. Okay, it's been about 48 minutes now since I've applied the size. Just out of curiosity's sake, I'm going to go ahead and put some composition leaf on here. You'll notice right here that it's obviously a little bit too dry on the size. That's why the composition leaf did not stick. But right now is the optimum time to put on the 23 karat. Let's give it a shot. Now again, this is just a test. That's why I'm applying the leaf vertically. We're going to tickle that. Let's go ahead and give it a couple spins. Okay, it's been 65 minutes since I applied the size. I'm going to go ahead and test out some more 23 karat. Let's just see how this works out. We still got a squeak. We don't have any product. We don't have any smears. We're going to tickle that. What I'm trying to do here is define the best working window. Let's give that a spin. Let's wait a few more minutes and try it again. Okay, now we've reached the 75-minute mark. Let's go ahead and apply some more 23 karat and see how the size affects the gold now. Go ahead and give it a burnish. And a quick spin. Looks good. Let's give it a few more minutes and try it again. Okay, now we're at 88 minutes. Let's go ahead and give it one more test with the 23 karat. We still have some squeak. We don't have any smears, which is good, but it's getting very close to losing its tack. Here again, we use the cotton ball to get rid of some of the excess leaf. Let's give it one spin. Okay, now we're at the 100-minute mark since I applied the size. At this point, it's almost too late to put the leaf on, but let's just see what happens and use it as a test bed. As you can see, the cotton's taking off some of the leaf, so it's not really adhering as well as it should at an earlier stage. As you can see right here, the velvet is actually taking off some of the leaf. So at this point, we know it's way too late to apply the leaf to the size. Okay, let's review our test. You can see here, 10 minutes after I applied the size, we got some definite knuckle marks and smears. Definitely not the right time to add the leaf. After 20 minutes, we're getting pretty close, but you can still see some definite smearage. You can see also that the leaf was very dull as I spun it. It was getting very close for composition leaf, but not quite there yet. You can see that a little bit dull on the spin. After 30 minutes, after applying the 23 karat, it's still a little bit on the dull side, but it's getting closer. 35 minutes was a great time to apply the composition leaf. You see we got a great spin, great adhesion, perfect conditions. Right here you'll notice that the leaf was a little bit ratty coming out of the roll, so I made a second pass right next to it just to make sure everything was okay. We're getting close, but not quite there yet. 7 minutes later we got a lot more brilliant spin and better adhesion. 48 minutes on the composition leaf, obviously way too late to apply the leaf. Didn't quite adhere up here. That's definitely a fail. Now we're at the 50-minute mark. This basically is the perfect time to add your gold leaf, especially the 23 karat, to this fast size. As you can see, the spins get a little bit more brilliant as the size dries. After 75 minutes, we're getting pretty close to the point of no return. 88 minutes, now we're getting right close to failure. And of course, after 100 minutes, no adhesion, just basically fail. Okay, what I've done here is graphed this out to show when the optimum window was applying the gold leaf. Under the working conditions we have today, we've established that our optimum working window is about 30 minutes, starting at 50 minutes and ending at about 80 minutes. This, of course, may vary in your area depending on temperature and humidity. One of the most important things in any job is surface prep. We want to make sure we have a very clean surface to work on. What I'm going to do right now is use a glass cleaner to take off any water-based contaminants. Now we're going to switch to a wax and grease remover. What this does is take off any wax, grease, polymers, anything like that to make sure the surface is very clean. Now remember, safety first. Always wear rubber gloves while working with these hazardous chemicals. What you want to do is wipe on and wipe off with a dry rag. You might want to go ahead and use a dry rag frequently to make sure you pick up all the contaminants on the dry rag. For this application, I've chosen to use Luco Quick Size, and as you can see, it comes in a clear in its raw state. What I want to do is go ahead and tint that so it's easier to see during application. This can be very messy and it's very sticky as well, so try to keep that all contained. You'll notice the size in the cup. I'm ready to go ahead and tint that now. So what you want to do is make sure that you don't over tint it. You don't want to use very much because that does screw with the integrity of the size. So use just enough tint to make it to where it's visible. You want to make sure that you stir it very, very thoroughly so it dries evenly. Okay, that looks great. Notice how runny this size is. You want to make special attention to the runniness of this because it's going to be a little bit difficult to apply. You don't want to get any runs, so you want to make sure that you evenly distribute the size to the panel. Okay, now I'm dipping the brush into the size. What I want to focus on right now is paletting technique. And if you'll notice, I'm paletting this out as thin as I can possibly get it. You do not want a flood stroke when you apply the size. That looks great. Now let's begin. I've gone ahead and used fine line tape to mask out where I want my stripe to go. Always remember, you want to make sure that surface is very free of dust. So here's your tack rag one more time. You can get these tack rags at any local auto body supply store. Then you're ready to put the size on. Okay, now it's time to apply the size. What I want to do is make sure I palette out the size very evenly on a palette, come up to the masked off area, and apply the size. Now notice how I'm doing it right here. A lot of folks like to go ahead and put it on in one stroke like this, but you'll notice it gets very heavy as it bunches up towards the bottom. What I normally do is go back and forth and very evenly displace the varnish. There There again, I've palleted the brush out to where there's hardly any size in there at all. Okay, moving back and forth as to evenly distribute that size the best I can. I want it as thin as possible. I don't want to get any thick or thin spots. As you can see here, this sheet is getting pretty gummed up. So what I want to do is use a brand new sheet, rip that off, and start with a fresh one. That's why I like to use old magazines as my palette. Feathering is basically what I'm after. You never want to go up and down, otherwise you will collect size on the bottom piece of tape. What I'm going to do right now is make a small test patch. We're going to use this to make sure we know when the size is ready to be gilded. This will wipe off later, so don't worry about marring the finish of the vehicle. Okay, using a Stabilo pencil, I'm going to write down what time it was when I completed this little test patch. So right now I know I've got about 1 hour before I can apply the gold. It's a good idea to remove the tape while the size is still wet, so it flows out. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and determine when the size is ready to gild. One way to test that is to give it a knuckle test. Notice that little bit of a tack there. My skin is being tacked on there. This is what's known as a whistle tack. Listen to this. Okay, we're just perfect. You also want to notice whether you're dulling the surface. We're getting very minimal dull. We're good to go. Okay, now I'm ready to go ahead and apply the gold leaf. What I want to do is go ahead and put a piece of tape at the very end, stretch it out, get it lined up with the size, and then apply it. Gold leaf does come in different types: rolled, loose leaf, and patent leaf. And obviously I've chosen to use the rolled leaf on this particular application. Make sure you press down firmly, then bring it off. Okay, that first roll was aluminum leaf. Now we're going with the real stuff, the 23 karat. There again, put your piece of tape at the very end, tack it down good, extend the roll out, and apply pressure. Same process. Bring it out and apply light pressure just to attach that gold to the size. On larger projects, you just obviously want to go ahead and extend past that. Doing a regular vehicle, you probably want to only do about 2 to 3 feet at a time to make sure it's more manageable. Now, here we go with the burnishing technique. Okay, now it's time to remove the excess leaf. I'm going to do this by using a cotton ball and moving it back and forth and in circular motions. What this does is two different things. It removes the excess leaf, and it also presses the leaf down onto the size for a more firmer grip. As you can see, we have a lot of sticking going on. That's indigenous to high humidity. So what we're going to do to fix that problem, I've got a rag full of wax and grease remover, not very saturated, just a little bit. What we're going to do is just use that to take off any of that excess. One more pass right there. Well, I guess right now we're going to just move right on to the burnishing technique. Okay, now we're ready to do the engine turning technique, and what I'm doing here is I'm working on composition leaf, and that is a little bit thicker leaf than the 23 karat leaf, so I need something a little bit more coarse to do the burnishing with. Believe it or not, a regular blue shop towel will work just fine. It's just coarse enough to get a great burnish. What I've done is taken a cotton ball and put it inside the rag, wrapped it around, and taped it to get a nice little round shape, just right for burnishing. What I want to do is push down right in the middle, press fairly firmly. I want the circles to barely connect, and overlapping, half a twist to a quarter twist. And you don't want to slide as you spin. You want to pivot right in the middle. Also, pay close attention to the measurements of the circles. You want them to touch and not overlap. Most purists would probably take a look at this and really freak out, but hey, the results are great. Great. Okay, with this 23 karat leaf, it's a lot softer, so if I were to use that blue shop towel, I would just tear this leaf apart. So what I've got here is a little spin-it tool made by Quill, Hare, and Farrell, covered in velvet. This will be just great for getting a nice spin. I want to push down, 1/4 twist. I want to make sure I try to get that lined up right dead center in the middle of that stripe. Touch the circle, 1/4 twist. Sometimes, if you go a half spin or more, you take a chance on scoring the leaf right down to the metal or the painted surface, which is very unpleasant to look at. So let's try to avoid that. You can do that best by just sticking with the 1/4 spin technique. Looks great. Now what I'm going to do is do a checkerboard effect. What I've done is taken some clear acetate, 3 mil, and cut out a square. What I'm going to do here is just take and place that down evenly with the stripe, and I want to burnish horizontally. I'll pick that up, place it right next to the other square, go vertically, and just repeat this process over and over until you reach the end of the stripe. This does take a lot longer than regular engine turning, but it's got a very unique look to it, and people will ask, how did he do that? You could make a stencil with multiple squares in it. What happens there is sometimes you get a little bit off on the measurements and they don't line up, so it's best just to use the single. This is very tedious work, but I think it's well worth the time because it is a very different effect. What I'm going to do here is basically duplicate the other 23 karat gold bun stripe, but what I want to do differently on this one is after I get through spinning it, I'm going to add some House of Color candy concentrates to this particular stripe. What that's going to do is kind of set this back a touch and make it so it's not quite so bright, plus you can add colors and really tint the gold leaf. It's a really cool effect, and I can't wait to give it a shot. Wow, that's beautiful. Right now what I want to do is go ahead and mix up some candy concentrates. I want to do a special effect on the gold leaf, basically by spraying some candy concentrates on it. You get a really cool effect that way. But for right now, let's go ahead and mix this up correctly. What I want to do is get some of this SG100. It's basically a polyester-based base clear. I want to go ahead and mix some of this candy concentrate by House of Color. This is the Oriental Blue. The mixture I want to use here is basically about 30% candy concentrate, 70% SG100. Stir that up very well. Now I'm going to use some of this RU311 as the reducer to put into the concentrate. I'm going to be using a gravity feed airbrush, and with any small airbrush like that, you have to thin it out just a little bit more than usual. Right now I'm kind of going by feel rather than what's on the direction. The viscosity is just right when it drips free from the popsicle stick, basically just like this. Mix that up thoroughly. Looks great to me. Let's give it a shot. I've already strained the candy, filled the airbrush. Now let's tack this thing off. Let's get to spraying. Okay, what I want to do here is basically give us a little bit of a test pattern right here. It's easier to start out light and heavy up as you go. It's much harder to go in reverse. Let's go ahead and just spray a light coat. Try to keep it as even as possible. And there again, like I said, lighter to darker. We're going to give this one more coat now. Like I said, be very even. And this is going to get darker with each pass you make. Now, when you unmask this, you're going to be surprised. It'll be about 20% darker than what you thought. Okay, now it's time to unmask. Now that we've unmasked it, you can kind of see how this candy concentrate really gives that a great little tone of blue. As compared to the stripe below, just in its raw form, it gives it a little bit extra twist. Now in review, the bottom stripe is the composition leaf, the aluminum. Remember, we had to use a coarser velvet to get the burnishing spin on that. The second line is the checkerboard effect, where we use the acetate cut into a small square. The third line is basically the 23 karat leaf spun with velvet. And of course, last but not least is the 23 karat engine turn technique with some candy concentrate sprayed on top of that for a really cool twist. For this project, we're going to be doing a prismatic star out of 23 karat gold leaf using an acetate stencil to control where we burnish. What we're going to do now is apply the size inside this computer-generated mask. And what you want to do is make sure that you apply the size very evenly. You don't want to overlap and rework brush strokes. If you do that, the size will be more uneven in spots. Basically, it'll be overworked and it will dry uneven. One thing about computer-generated masks is if you aim your brush right towards the break in the mask, you're going to collect a lot of size buildup. So what you want to do is make sure that you scoop all that out. If you see any dust specks plop into the size, like this one right here, make sure you just use the corner of your brush and remove it and try to patch up that size. Now we are using a quick size on this particular project, so what I want to do is go ahead and brush on a small amount of size off away from the project, and what this will be used for is to determine when the size will be ready for gilding. Now when this tacks up, we'll know because we're going to run our knuckle across it, and if it squeaks, we'll know it's ready to go. At this point, you want to remove the mask. Make sure you do it kind of slowly and keep an eye to make sure you don't really lift up any of the size. And also, you want to pay close attention that you don't let any of this mask drape over onto the project because it might score the size and affect the leaf application. Now it's time to add the leaf to the project. So what you want to do is kind of line the gold leaf up the best way you can. Put your finger down and roll it up. This is patent leaf, so there again, it's going to come off in sections. You want to make sure that you evenly spread that out. You're forcing that gold leaf into the size. Now you'll notice there's little spots that aren't covered with gold. So you go back up, push it down, you're good to go. There's one more here as well. So what you want to do is find some gold, position it, push it down. Okay, now it's time to go ahead and remove the excess leaf. And what you want to do is take the cotton ball and go in a slight circular motion here and remove off any of that excess leaf. This is also known as tickling. What it does is it gives the gold a burnish. Okay, that cleaned up quite nice. Now you're ready to burnish. Okay, now it's time to add the prismatic effect to the project here. And what I've got is a pre-cut stencil that I've made up earlier. We're going to place that into position, and we're going to burnish this particular effect straight up and down. Now I am using mohair here. The movement before was vertical. Now we're going horizontal to achieve that prismatic effect. Now we're going to keep placing this stencil. It lines up perfectly. Now we're going to go straight up again. Flip the stencil back to horizontal. As you can see, we're getting the prismatic effect happening quite rapidly. Line that stencil back up again. As you can see, everything lines up pretty well from the reference points. There again, this will be straight up and down. Keeping in mind, you want to make sure that you don't follow the shape of the stencil. You want to make sure it's in the shape of the panel. Line that back up again. Going back to horizontal. There again, it's very easy to try to follow the shape of that pattern. There again, make sure everything's lined up. It's very critical to make sure everything's lined up correctly to get no overlaps. And that's completed. As you can see, the light refracts differently depending on the direction of the burnish. For instance, when I go straight up and down, it's a lighter source. On the opposite direction, where I go horizontally, you got more of a dark burnish. And that's completed. In this segment, we're covering hand-painted gold leaf lettering. As you can see, we have a pattern already pre-made. I have the Sorel paper ready to go. So now we're going to transfer the image to the panel. To transfer this image to the panel, I'm going to use blue Sorel paper. I've chosen that because it contrasts the color of the panel. Sorel paper comes in various colors: white, blue, yellow, and red. I recommend that you do get a light color Sorel paper and a dark color Sorel paper. That way you got all your bases covered. Sorel paper is very similar to carbon paper. As you can see, when I apply pressure to the surface, it does make a transfer on the back. Okay, right now I'm going to start transferring the design. Now by pushing the pen against the paper, just pretend like you're just drawing, retracing right over what you got here. And that will transfer that image right to the panel. It's best to use a pen because a pencil lead might get a little bit dull as you go. The pen will stay sharp at all times, and you don't want this line to be very thick. Therefore, the pen is the best bet. As far as the pattern goes, if you do know anybody with access to a computer, see if they'll go ahead and print you out a pattern. It's much easier to do it that way. It's much easier to focus on brush strokes and keeping your line quality straight without having to worry about making sure the design looks good. If you do make a mistake, it's easy to remove. Basically, just take a rag, a little bit of water, and it takes it right off, and you can just redraw. What you also want to keep in mind, too, is you make sure this pattern is secure. That way you can go ahead and check to make sure you have all your lines drawn. If you do miss a couple lines, and you have registration marks already drawn, you can go right back and retrace those. There again, this is basically a pattern, so you don't need to get very technical with it. If you do go outside the lines, you're able to go ahead and touch that up by hand painting it correctly. I'm going to place some tape right here. What I'm trying to do is register this pattern so that if I do miss some Sorel paper, I can go back and make sure I get right where it's supposed to be. I'm just going to draw a star right here. That way when I do remove the pattern and replace it, you can see right where it lines up. Upon looking at this, everything looks pretty good, so it's time to move on. Now I'd like to introduce you to hand lettering and the gold leaf technique. Okay, we're going to be using a tack rag to take off any of the dust that's on the panel because the dust will affect the gold leaf application. You can purchase your tack rag any place they sell paint. I buy mine at my local auto body supply store. Make sure you get all the dust off. Now you're ready to go. Okay, now it's time to letter the size onto the panel. Now when you're applying the size, you want to use the basic techniques that you would use normally with a regular alkyd-based enamel, such as one-shot, chromatic, or anything like that. You really don't want to overwork the size either. Any overworking will actually thicken the size up, and there again make it a little bit too thick. If you'll notice, the size has been tinted with some one-shot imitation gold. You don't want to use very much of that because it does actually top coat a little bit harder. And using the pattern that we established earlier, it's almost like coloring in a coloring book. Try to do as thick a stroke as possible as opposed to outlining and then filling in the blanks. So use as much of that brush as possible and really thin out that gold size. The brush that I'm using is a brown squirrel hair brush available through Luco Brush Company. You can also use a MAC, Cosmos, or any other high quality brush. The brush size that I'm using here is about a number 10. You don't want to really get it too big of a brush because you'll really fight trying to stay within the lines. And too small of a brush, you'll get too many brush strokes. So you really got to be careful in choice of the selection of the brush. What you could also do is if you have somebody that has access to a computer and a vinyl making machine, have them make you a Gerber mask stencil of this. So what you could do is actually apply the stencil down, remove the lettering itself, then apply this within, then pull the masking off if you're not really too sure about your lettering techniques. To spray it, the ratio that you should use is actually just barely enough viscosity to get out of the airbrush tip. If you get too much reducer, it dries too slow. It's best to use this size right out of the can. If you do have to thin it out for any reason, it's best to use mineral spirits for that. But there again, when you do thin it out, it does dry a little bit slower. And also the tack won't be as strong, and that's the most important thing, is a very strong tack to make sure that for outdoor applications you get a good bond. That's why I think it's very important that if you do have access to a computer, you already have the outline established for you so you can concentrate more on size application. Okay, now it's time to apply the leaf. What we're going to do here is quickly test the size just to make sure it's ready. Hear that squeak? We're good to go. What we want to do is try to make sure you get most of the letter covered with the biggest portion of leaf possible to avoid any laps or creases. As you can see, we have extra spots up here that need to be covered. We'll just take this patent leaf, go up here, and piece those in. I would say the patent leaf is the most user-friendly leaf. Whenever possible, make sure you purchase the patent leaf. What you want to do is make sure you put a slight overlap in there just to make sure that everything is covered. By using the 23 karat, it's a lot softer metal, so if you do get seams or overlaps, the metal is so soft that it will actually melt into place, hiding the seams. Right now I'm just inspecting it just to make sure everything is covered because you don't want any exposed leaf. And one thing you also want to keep in mind too is you do not want this paper to touch any of the sides, because if that does happen, you will have a dulling finish there. The gold will look different in that area. Okay, it looks kind of rough right now, so let's go ahead and remove some of that excess leaf. I achieved that by using this cotton ball in a circular motion, and this takes off any of the leaf that's not sticking to the sides. As you can see, we do have some sticking. That's this portion right here. What that is caused by is high humidity, which we do have a lot of that today. I'm not using very much pressure at all. What you do not want to do is score the leaf. You want to go ahead and give it a nice burnish, which we have right now. So what we're going to do is move on to a spin. At this point, we're ready to go ahead and do the engine turning technique. So what you want to do is make sure that you position the center of the spin-it tool right in the center of the letter. All it needs is 1/4 turn, bring it up, and make sure that these little circles just touch each other. You don't want much of an overlap there. If you'll notice, 1/4 turn, make sure that the outside diameter of the circles touch each other, then continue. There again, you don't want to put too much pressure down either, because you're going to score right through the leaf. So pay very close attention to the pressure that you're applying to the spin-it tool. You don't have that problem. The tools that I'm using here are by Quill, Hare & Farrell. They're covered with velvet. They're all handmade tools. They have a slight dome shape to them, so in other words, they're not a 90-degree angle. So most tools you'll find have a direct 90-degree angle, so when you go to do the engine turning, you'll actually walk the tool. With this dome shape, it'll actually find a pivot point and make it a lot easier to get a perfect spin. And don't deviate from that. Just 1/4 spin and you're good to go. Position these spins to where the outside of the circles always touch each other. It's not very necessary to always overlap or get too carried away there. On this project, I've taken some transfer paper and already applied it to the panel, as you can see here. I've gone ahead and taken my image, transferred it to the panel, pre-cut it out. Now we're going to go ahead and put some size on the panel. Okay, you want to make sure the surface is very free of dust, so we'll go ahead and tack that off. Alright, now we're ready to apply the gold size. Okay, you want to make sure you palette the size very evenly in the brush. Try to keep it as thin as possible too. As you can see, I've already tinted my size, so I know right where I'm going. And there again, you want to make sure you evenly palette the size to the panel. You want to do this as quickly as possible. You don't want to have any dry spots. So basically you want to work from one direction to the other evenly, just like mowing a lawn. The transfer paper that I'm using here in this project you can get at your local science supply store. It's really handy to have around. It makes layout and masking very easy. Remember, you don't want to overwork the size. It's best to have as little brush mark as possible. If you have any dust particles that happen to fly into the project, just take the corner of your brush, pick them off, and disperse them off to the side. You also want to make sure that you keep the edges free of size buildup. You can do that by taking the brush and going with the cut, taking all that size and evenly displacing it throughout. Okay, let's let that dry. We'll apply the leaf later. Okay, now remember, we have to have a little test panel to make sure we know when the size is ready to be gilded. So what I'm going to do here is just expose some of that transfer paper. Just do a little bit of a pass with the brush right there. That's what we're going to use to go ahead and test it with our knuckle to make sure it's ready to go. Right now I'm going to go ahead and write down the time that we applied the size. Okay, now it's time to remove the mask. You want to be very careful that you don't get the mask into the size. It's important to move the mask while the size is still wet. You can use a razor blade to get a good grip on the transfer paper, so you can grab your finger to it and pull it off. Remember, take great care to make sure you don't touch the paper to the size. Let's go from the bottom up here. And our last piece right here. Okay, we're going to let this dry for a little bit. We're going to keep close track of the time, keep testing it periodically, and that way we'll know when to apply the leaf. What I'm going to use here on this particular project is some variegated leaf that you can get at Coast Airbrush. If you pay particular close attention to this design right here, I want to go ahead and place that in the largest portion of the pattern we got already established. Okay, what I'm doing right now is I'm going to go ahead and shred some of this leaf. So when I apply it, I don't want to get any visible seams. And since the variegated pattern has such wild shapes into it, if I shred this, when they match up, you can't tell where the seam is. Now this is a loose leaf, so it's going to be very hard to work with. That's why I'm securing it very well with this paper before I actually score it with the blade. As you can see, when that butts up, you can't see where one leaf begins and the other one ends. This is the way you want the leaf to look before you actually apply it to the size. If you'll notice, it's very well shredded. We have no straight lines for any seam. Right now we're going to go ahead and test the size to see if it's ready to apply the leaf. We've got a good squeak going, a little bit of smearing going on. That's good because you want to put the leaf on a little bit sooner than you would with 23 karat because this is a composition leaf which is a lot thicker. As you can see, I flipped over the panel so I can make it easier to apply the leaf. Remember, work smarter, not harder. What I want to do is make sure that I go ahead and get the interesting part of the design in the thickest portion of the flame. So I'm going to go ahead and try to position that right now. Go from the bottom, press down, and flip it up. You do not want to touch the paper to the size, otherwise it will go ahead and dull it, and you'll see that in the project. If you'll notice, I have my index fingers in the back, my thumbs in the front, and I'm exposing the leaf a little bit. What I'm going to do is go ahead and apply the leaf, starting from the bottom and working up. I'm overlapping very slightly, most of my index fingers, You do not want the paper to touch the size, and pull down. And you'll notice no visible seam where they connected. Right now I just want to make sure I got very good adhesion, so I'm going to take this piece of paper, just use my thumb, and lightly press down the leaf. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and remove the excess leaf by using a cotton ball. Best to go in circular motions, back and forth, whatever it takes to get that excess leaf off. This is composition leaf. It's quite a bit thicker than the 23 karat, so we can get a little more rough with it. I've used the most interesting pattern in the leaf on the thickest part of the design. And also notice there's no visible seams because we did shred the leaf. Let's clean this up a little bit now. We're going to go back in here with a rag and just wipe that off. As you can see, the wax and grease remover is just strong enough to take that off without marring the surface. Okay, now it's time to clear coat the leaf. Right now we're going to use a tack rag to get off any remaining leaf so we don't get that in the clear. It is important to protect the leaf, so right now we're going to go ahead and use some halves of colored clear. Right here I've used 4 parts of UC3 striping clear to 1 part KU200 catalyst. Notice the consistency. You don't want it too runny because it has to be durable, but yet still palatable. Okay, I've paleted the clear. Now I'm ready to apply it. What you want to do is make sure you stay just inside the lines. Try to keep everything nice and even. It's best to work from one direction to the other to avoid brush marks. There again, try to work on the larger areas first to evenly displace the clear. We're going to keep paleting the brush to make sure we keep that clear nice and thin. We don't want to have it too thick because we want to avoid brush marks. And try to keep as thick a strokes as possible for nice, even brush marking. Another trick also is to feather away from the direction that you're going to really feather out that clear. That avoids glopping as well. So for instance, if I'm moving down on the project, I want to always brush up and away like this. Now all gold leaf projects should be cleared for durability, otherwise they will tarnish or come off the project. I suggest using an automotive based catalyzed clear or urethane clear. The brush that I'm using right here is a brown haired squirrel brush that's available through Luco. It is a number 10 in size. The brown hair brushes are a little bit softer than the gray hairs, so that's what I would suggest for all clear coating. What I'm doing right now is making sure I got complete coverage of the clear. As you get in the light just right, you can see if you missed any area at all. Looks like we're doing okay. We're going to go ahead and give this clear coat about 2 hours to dry. I'd like to thank Tom Pruitt of Damon's Motorcycle Creations for supplying us with this beautiful tank for our next project. We'll be working on this beautiful pearl base that he's provided, but first we have to go ahead and color sand it because the entire project will be automotive clear coated. Okay, right now I'm going to go ahead and sand the project with 600 grit sandpaper because the whole entire project will be clear coated. You'll know when you're done when the whole surface is uniformly dull. This is also a great way to get out any dust specks or imperfections in the clear. We're going to go ahead and wipe this down, dry it up a bit, just to inspect it to see if we have any shiny areas that we might have missed. Now that I've sanded and dulled the tank, I'm going to apply the mascot paper. Try not to get any air bubbles in there if you can help it. It's best to squeegee from the inside in the outer direction. Since it's a convex surface, you will get some wrinkling, but that's okay. Don't worry about it. It'll be just fine. Make sure it's pressed down very evenly. Okay, and now we're ready to apply the pattern. As you can see here, I've already centered the pattern onto the tank. What I'm going to do now is take this Sorel paper, try to slide it behind, and transfer the image to the mask-off paper. Now all we have to do is just start tracing. Since this is a convex surface, you want to go ahead and make sure that you do push down the paper to make sure you get an even pattern. Okay, now what I want to do is go ahead and make a registration mark about right here. What this does is it gives me a chance to put the pattern right back exactly where it was, just in case I missed any of the Sorel paper. Okay, that looks great. Let's go ahead and cut that out with the razor blade, peel it out, and apply the size. Okay, as you can see here, I'm using a straight edge razor. but if you feel more comfortable using an X-Acto knife, go ahead and do that, whatever's best for you. I'm using a very light pressure on this. You do not want to go down too far into the clear coat. Just do your very best to put light pressure, just enough pressure to get through that mask off paper. You get your best results by always having a brand new blade on hand, and if you'll notice, I have my guide finger a lot further back on the blade, as not to put too much tension at the very front. Right here I'm using my fingernail to pull on that, just to make sure I did cut it. Okay, that was the last cut. We're going to go ahead and take the razor blade, lift the corner of that masking paper, and pull it up. You want to go kind of slowly, just in case you missed any spots with the razor blade, that you don't tear the paper. You always want to make sure that you pull away from the cut as well, not into the pattern. So you missed one right there. Let's go back in, cut that, we're good to go. That's why you should go very slow. So you can see we missed a cut right there. We go back in, take care of that problem. There again, that's why you want to go very slow. Looks like we have another one. On these more intricate designs, you're going to run across this quite frequently. So let's go very slow, methodically. You'll be okay. Alright, now we're ready to go ahead and tack that off and apply the gold sides. Okay, now it's time to go ahead and tack off the project. But before I do, I'm going to go ahead and pay special attention to make sure I press down any of these little cracks that have cropped up, just so the sides doesn't crawl underneath. One thing also to mention, that these little points right here, I always want to go ahead and tack in the direction of the point. Otherwise, if I go in this direction, it will peel the masking paper back off. So always go in the direction of the point. Now let's go ahead and apply the gold size. Okay, now I've palleted the size into the brush. Now it's time to go ahead and apply it. There again, you want to keep it as thin as possible. And it's always good to work from the front to the back, or just from one direction to the other, so you maintain the size. And you can see I'm really trying to keep that size as thin as possible without getting a whole lot of brush stroke, because the thinner the size, the better the project will turn out. Make sure you pay close attention to the puddling at the bottom of the mask, like right here. That's a trouble spot. Keep an eye out for things like that. Just take your brush, feather in, take it right out. Any speck of dust, use the corner of your brush, place it to the masking paper. There again, I'm using a number 10 squirrel hair brush by Luco, but any brown hair squirrel brush will work. Notice how thin the gold size is being applied. You don't want to use a flood stroke. Make sure you palette that size out very, very thin in the brush. Go ahead and palette the brush and finish this last stroke. Let's go ahead and look at the tank on an acute angle just to make sure we don't have any dry spots. Right now I'm just going to go ahead and put a little test pad of size just to be able to test the size before it's ready to apply the leaf. Okay, now it's time to go ahead and remove the mask. What I want to go ahead and do here is split the mask right down the middle. That way it's easier to remove instead of pulling the whole mask off at once. I don't want to get any mask back into the size. There again, pay special attention as you don't get any of that mask in there at all. Now we'll go to the other side. There again, take your razor blade, pick up a small corner. Sometimes it's good to use the razor blade and your finger to grab hold of the masking. Pull it right off. We have one little sliver of mask here. Let's go ahead and carefully take that out. You don't want your fingers to touch the sides either. Alright, looks great. Let's go ahead and give it some gold. It's been 43 minutes. Let's go ahead and give it the knuckle test. We've got a lot of tack left in there still. We've got a good squeak as well, but I think 10 more minutes will be very good. Okay, it's been about 50 minutes. Let's go ahead and give that a test again. Got a great squeak. We don't have any mars in the finish. We're ready to apply the gold right now. We're going to go ahead and take this patent leaf, put it on, just give it a light brush with the thumb, pull off. What I've chosen to do here is use a clean sheet each time because I don't want to get any of that paper onto the wet sides because it will dull it. So notice I'm not pushing down where the paper is. And it's best to get as few wrinkles as possible. There again, don't push that paper into the size. There again, we did wait till the size was just about dry because you get a better burnish that way. But I wanted to make sure I still had a working window. I want to make sure I still got some time left for the burnish. Let's go ahead and use the cotton to remove any excess leaf. This also helps push down the leaf onto the size. There again, just go into a circular motion. You want to make sure that you don't get your thumbnail or any fingernail into the gold, so keep those well buried in the cotton. I'm applying a very light pressure, only enough to get the gold leaf off. You want to make sure you don't mar up the gold either, because you want it to be as shiny as possible so the burnish stands out from it. Looks great. Let's go ahead and do the prismatic effect. This is the pattern that I've laid out. What you can see here is these little black lines indicate the direction that I want to burnish to get the prismatic effect. Wherever these little lines meet, I want to make sure they're in opposite burnishing directions to achieve that effect. Okay, now what I'm about to do is take some 3-mil acetate, place it up on the master pattern, and go ahead and cut out a small section that will be used in the bevel. What I want to do is make sure I cut it exactly where the lines are. This acetate being clear, you can see right through and make an exact cut. I'll be making a series of these. Each piece will be done separately. Right now I'm applying the stencil, or actually holding it up to the gold. I don't want to actually smear it onto the gold because it will mar the finish. Again, I'm going to check my pattern to make sure I know which way to burnish it. I know from this section right here, I want to go directly horizontal. Once I reach about 3/4 of the way up, I want to make my transition into a more vertical. Okay, right now I'm just going to line this up the best I can. I'm just going to concentrate on doing one little section at a time. I don't really want to go up into the upper portion. I'm going to burnish this in a horizontal direction. And there again, as you apply pressure to the acetate to hold it down, make sure you don't push it right onto the gold. We're done. Wow. Since pinstriping and clear coating go beyond the scope of this video, you can learn more on these subjects by visiting our website at www.airbrushaction.com. I hope you learned a lot and enjoyed this presentation. Thank you for watching.